Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
Did you hear the news that there's a big push against people now injecting helium into farm animals?
Injecting helium into farm
animals? You would
animals?
think, who would do such a thing?
Wow, no kidding.
A lot of people are saying this is highly, highly unethical.
Huh.
But my own view of it is, hey, whatever floats your goat. A few weeks ago, we talked about the letter Q in the LGBTQ acronym. And it can mean queer or it can mean questioning. We want to talk a little bit about queer and how young people, especially, although not all young people, but many people in the LGBTQ community are reclaiming this word queer, finding that it is a better word to describe their own experience than many of the other words. First of all, it's a way to say, you know what, you used to use this word against me as a slur, but I'm going to reclaim that word for myself, and you don't have any power over me because I'm going to call myself this. But there are other reasons to use this word as well. Many people will say, you know, gay or lesbian or bisexual, those are kind of limiting words. I might be primarily attracted to women, and maybe lesbian is a pretty close word, but then what happens if I find myself attracted to a man one time? Or then you throw non-binary people in, and well, do I have to now figure out exactly how all of my attractions work with this? And do I need a word that defines exactly who I am? For a lot of people, definitions can be really limiting. Now, for me, I tend to like definitions. They help me understand who I am. But yet, even for myself, there's times where I feel like all of the other words don't quite work. Maybe I don't want to out myself as being transgender. And so I might just say, I'm queer. And that sums up all of the things. It means that I don't match up with how gender expectations were originally given to me. And it means that I might not line up with who I'm supposed to be attracted to. Or I might not live my life in terms of gender and sexuality expectations the way that people might want me to. I don't have to define exactly how I'm different. I can just say, I don't match what the normal expectations are. I'm queer. And it's kind of a catch-all word.
It's not unusual that over time, words become negative or different, and then later on, some people will say, well, wait a minute, there's something okay about that. I can think of an example going back to merry old England,
Yes.
where in England, there was an organization started called the Odd Fellows. And I thought, why would a bunch of guys get together and call themselves Odd Fellows? To be a service organization. Isn't that unusual?
That is very strange. Did you find out why?
Yes, I did. As it turned out, there were some people who became house husbands because their wife had a job and supported the family, so they stayed home and took care of the kids. They would, during the day, meet each other outside when they were walking the kids around or something, and suddenly decided that they knew they were being called Odd Fellows, and they said, you know, we ought to see what we can do. How can we contribute to society? What things can we do? So when they finally decided to do this, and they said, what are we going to call our organization? They said, everyone else calls us Odd Fellows. Let's call ourselves the Odd Fellows.
Interesting.
It makes complete sense. And they did it. And today there is still an Odd Fellows organization out there. In fact, you go around the country and you'll see Odd Fellows halls.
I've heard of Odd Fellows before, of course.
Exactly. And it's no different from what they call the animal lodges, the eagles and the elks and those kind of things. Lions. There's a bunch of organizations like that are out there doing good work. And just supporting each other. So it's not unusual that here they came to reclaim the Odd Fellows definition as something positive.
And that's exactly what has happened with the word queer. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you can just assume that somebody is okay with that word. It still has negative connotations for many, many people. And in general, a good rule is to never use a label for somebody that they don't use for themselves. So somebody might say, I'm not okay being called gay. Then we don't call them gay. Somebody says, I'm not okay being called bisexual. Then we don't call them bisexual. And somebody says, I'm not okay being called queer. Then we don't call them queer. But the word, of course, originally started off just meaning something similar to Oddfellows. It means odd, different, strange. It was somebody that was outside of the normal.
They were in the minority.
Right. And when you're in the minority, it can be difficult for people that have never experienced what you've gone through to fully identify with that or recognize the times where you need special provisions. For instance, I know that there are several special provisions that people that are deaf or that are blind might need, and I don't know the first thing about those. But I can tell you that somebody that is could immediately tell me, and not only do they know the special provisions that they need, they are probably very aware of all of the misperceptions that I have. Because for me, this would be my very first time. But for them, they've dealt with people like me where it's my very first time, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of times. It's very old hat for them knowing somebody that doesn't know what provisions to make. It's the same when we come to the LGBTQ community.
So someone on the outside wouldn't know that, and they might say something wrong. They might say the wrong thing. What happens if I say the wrong thing? For example, I think I heard somebody else say something about being queer, and I thought, well, I guess that's what I should say. And I found out, that someone was offended when I said that. Now what do I do?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I think it's as easy as that.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be offensive. I heard somebody else say that. But then also, hopefully, then you listen to this podcast and now you know to change your language there. Dad, I know you have been frustrated recently with some scenarios where people have been very judgmental towards queer people or towards LGBTQ people.
Oh, yes, absolutely. First of all, they don't know that I do this podcast. And because I haven't shared it with them, they're not people that are very close. They're not part of my inner circle. They may not know that I have a transgender daughter. They may not know that I am supportive. Not only am I accepting, but I'm affirming. So when it comes out sometimes and they may say something, it will frustrate me. And in all honesty, I'd like to each time say something, but I don't, because I don't want to make an issue out of something. It's a minor thing as I see it. I'll give you an example that's a little different. I'm left-handed. That's nothing here in the States. I think it might be 10 or 12% of the people in the world are left-handed. But in some countries, it's not acceptable. In Japan, when I lived in Japan, people always commented on the fact that I was left-handed.
Because you gross person.
Yes, terrible. I'm a terrible person. Actually, they thought it was cute. They thought it was cute because I can be that way because I am not one of them. But if I was, I would have been taught early on to use my right hand. when I pick up chopsticks, they'll immediately notice I use my left hand, and they'll always comment on it. And, that gets old after a while, but I don't say anything. They laugh and they think it's cute. Well, it's not that cute to me after 2 years being there, but it's okay. I accept it.
And that is a very good picture of what our experience in the LGBTQ community is like. And if you've never experienced it for yourself, you would have no way of knowing. But I can guarantee that every single one of us has our own stories, our own war stories, so to speak. I just heard one recently. Somebody was telling the story about a gay man who was in the closet. And he wanted to find out and kind of feel out where his father was going to be with everything. And he said, "Hey, Dad, I heard a story about a gay person recently. What do you think about gay people?" And the father said, "Well, I think those gay people deserve to be shot." And the father thought he was making a throwaway comment about those people out there. And yet, he had just severed his relationship with his own son, thinking, this doesn't affect me. I don't know anyone that's gay. This is all of those people out there. From that moment on, the son thought, you are not a safe person to talk to, and began to retreat. And the father had no idea. What did he say? What did he do? He had no idea. We all have stories like that.
It's an interesting example, and I'm glad you brought that up on this podcast, because we know that 60% of the people who listen to this podcast are people who are allies or are hoping to become allies. They're trying to learn, how can I accept my son or my daughter and into what they are and who they are, and I don't understand it, so help me understand it. That's one of the main reasons that we're doing this, and we think it's so critical. Each one of the podcasts that we do has a message somewhere for someone. If that happens to be you, I would encourage you to write us. That's easy. It's at transcendent@gmail.com. Being in the minority does not make you abnormal. There's so many things about so many people that make them part of the minority. I can tell you, whoever you are, in some areas you are in the minority. I know you are. We all are. I'll give you one example. I just mentioned it earlier. I'm left-handed. I'm in the minority. Fortunately, my wife is also left-handed, so we're in the minority together. And I kind of like that. We think it's sort of cool. We think it's kind of a in thing. And anytime we see somebody else who's in our minority, we have a connection. We think it's really cool. Like you referred to earlier, they're family. We're all left-handed. I will comment every time we go to a restaurant and a waitress is taking our order, or a waiter, and they are writing it down with their left hand. My first comment is, we know something that a lot of people don't know. And the waiter or waitress will say, "Oh, really? Yeah, what is that?" And I say, all great people are left-handed.
And for you in the audience, this is not once in a while that Dad might do this. This is literally any single left-handed person that Dad meets ever.
Yeah. And I tend to think better about every one of the presidents who's been left-handed, from George Washington all the way to Barack Obama.
Wow.
Yeah, there's been a lot of left-handed presidents out there, and I think that's pretty cool. That's every one of us. But are you in the minority in some area? Let me give you an example. If you play the piano, you're in the minority. I don't think 50% of the people play the piano.
No. I'm sure not.
So you're in the minority. There's one example. If you are a professional sports person, I think you're in the minority. Not too many people make pros. There's so many things like that. If you are an accordion player, you are definitely in the minority.
In statistics, they always look at what is the average. So that's, what is that? The mean, I think?
I would guess.
Or the median, I guess. But then they always look at the standard deviation. And what that is it's saying, okay, imagine you've got a bell curve and most of the people fall in the middle. However, the number of people that fall exactly in the middle is itself a minority. So what they can do is say, okay, the average person doesn't actually fall in the middle. So how far away from the middle does the average person fall? And they call that the standard deviation. So even though the average person might fall, let's say that they've got a scale of 1 to 100, the average person falls at 50, but most people don't fall at 50. Most people are going to fall maybe 20 or 25 points outside of that. So the standard deviation means that you are well within the range of normal if you're way down at 25 or way up at 75. And that's how life is in general. That there's a lot of things where most people are a certain way, but most of us are not how most people are.
Sometimes we are lumped together into a larger group. And then within that group, there are additional divisions. The biggest group I can think of that probably incorporates maybe 50% of the people. I don't think it's quite that high, but maybe, is people who collect something. So if you collect something, you're going to find other people that you meet who collect something. But maybe it's not a common thing like coins or dolls or stamps. Maybe it's autographs. Or maybe it's something really obscure. Your aunt, my sister-in-law, collects kaleidoscopes. Now, that's a pretty rare thing. That puts her in a very small minority. No one would look at her and think of her as being odd or different because she collects kaleidoscopes. And also, they would find it interesting. It makes an interesting conversation piece for her. It's also something that helps other people understand her a little bit more. They know that she has become somewhat of an expert in kaleidoscopes. A great thing. And instead of something that is odd, different, abnormal, it's a great thing. Wow, this is really cool. Can't we look at the LGBTQ group and find the same thing? This is different, but this is interesting.
Maybe it's our community. There was a book that came out, probably 2 decades ago now, by John Ortberg. And the title of the book was Everybody's Normal Till You Get to Know Them. And I love that title. It is so true, isn't it? Think of anybody that you know. Think of a teacher or somebody that you know at work or somebody that you see at the store or anybody in your life, a family member, a friend, anyone at all. And think to yourself, are they normal? Any single person. I can't think of a single person that would come up in my mind and I would think, oh yeah, they're a really pretty normal person. Because as soon as I start to think about their personality, I think of all of the ways that they're different from an average person. Every single one of us is like that. None of us is exactly the same as everybody else. We're all unique because we're all individuals. When we're talking about being queer, when we're talking about the queer community or the LGBTQ community, it is completely normal. Who we are as gender and sexual minorities is completely within the realm of normal. We may not be average, but we're just as normal as anyone else.
Years ago, many years ago, they might still say this, but I haven't heard anyone say this for a long time. Everybody said they had somebody in their family who was the black sheep. And if you were the black sheep, that meant you were abnormal. Well, every one of us in some way or another is a black sheep in our family. Is that not true?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think every one of us has that. And that, of course, has negative connotations of bucking against the rules or creating problems. But we all do that in some ways. We all do that.
Oh, yes, we do. I had an opportunity to visit a turkey farm where they raise turkeys. Of course, what else would they do?
I bet you gobbled that right up.
Well, one guy didn't do it very well. He got a bunch of small little turkeys and they all died. And he went back and said,
no.
Well, what happened? And he says, I don't know. He says, maybe I planted them too close or too deep. Or
No.
But in this turkey farm, they would move. They would start out in an incubator and then move to another area, and then they'd move as they grew. They'd move to a bigger area until they got into a large building. To me, it was about the size of a football field, and it was just filled with turkeys. And every day they would come through and pick up the dead ones. I was told by the person who owned the turkey farm that turkeys have a pecking order. And they will every day get together and they will find one that's at the bottom of the pecking order and peck it to death.
Oh.
Yeah. That is because they're in the minority, because they're different. And it's very common that happens. And I think those of you out there who've ever lived on a farm and raised chickens know that they have a pecking order as well. It's very similar. But in this enclosed area, yes, it was the size of a football field, but in this enclosed area, that happened daily.
Why is this an important message, Dad?
Because we know we don't need to be sorted out. Yes, you can be known in some form or other, but it's just another factor. It's not something to set you aside to be at the bottom of a pecking order. That's inappropriate. What is appropriate is to know this is just another fact about you. It's like saying, I like mincemeat pie. Really? Boy, I don't know anybody that likes mincemeat pie. What difference does it make? It's only a small part of your makeup. Yes, it's a big part of your makeup, but so is your arm. So is your leg. You know, and you can get along without it. You could be without it, but you wouldn't be the same person. You wouldn't be whole. You wouldn't be complete. And to make your own self complete, it may be a minority, but it certainly isn't anything to be shunned or afraid of or anything else. You're a whole person like everyone else. I'm surprised to realize that there are people out there who are afraid to be around people with Down syndrome. Well, what difference does it make? Are there people just like you and me? There's no difference. Yes, there is a difference, but it's a difference that I have a difference. I'm left-handed.
I have a difference. I have most of my hearing gone in my left ear. Every one of us has things where we are outside of the normal, where we're in the 99th percentile of how humans are.
But you have had that problem for so long that you just know how to live with it.
I don't even think about it very much anymore.
No, you've had it for years.
Oh. Also, one thing that I have a father that tells really, really dumb jokes.
And proud of it.
Unfortunately, there are still too many people who want to try to marginalize transgender people, especially. That's kind of the new issue. We sort of accepted that it's okay to be gay, but still, there's still a push saying, oh, you know, those transgender people out there.
Yeah.
I had somebody on one of my work phone calls the other day. He didn't know that he was talking to a transgender person. He just assumed that he was talking to a cisgender woman, working the phones, helping him out, doing whatever. And somehow it came up and he said, you know, those transgenders out there. And you can bet I shut my mouth. I wasn't going to speak up and say, actually, you know, you're speaking with one of those transgenders right now. I hear people talk about, oh, you know, what are the transgender people going to do when they invade our bathrooms? Or look at how they're transing our children. People use fear. It's the fear of the unknown. What are those transgender people doing out there? Well, I'll tell you what we're doing. We're living our lives not hurting anyone. Do you know that the people that are really hurt by all of these bathroom bills are not the transgender people? When I use the bathroom, nobody looks twice. I have worked really hard to make sure that I'm not turning heads when I use the bathroom. But you know who does turn heads? Is more masculine presenting women. Butch women that have a shorter haircut and maybe they're working out and they like playing sports and they like wearing more masculine clothing, but are every bit as female as any other woman out there. Those are the women that get stopped and say, excuse me, sir, the men's room is over there. And then they say, oh, I'm a woman. And as soon as they speak, then that person realizes their problem. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I should not have assumed about you. These bathroom laws and the way that they try to villainize transgender people ends up hurting other people. And it's not how we want to live.
No, we are each individual people, and we are each in some form queer. And we all know that. There is no one who is perfect, and each person is in some kind of minority. And that's okay. It's okay to be in a minority. In fact, I am here to tell you, you can't avoid it. And because that is a minority over there that I can't identify with, that doesn't make them less acceptable than you. That doesn't make you less acceptable than them. The minority is the majority.
Yes.
Everyone is a minority of some kind. So live with it. Accept it. And I think keep an open mind.
And if you are listening to this podcast, you are part of the elite minority. We are so grateful to have you coming back here week after week.
I did some research today to look at how are we doing. I went back 90 days to see how many downloads did we have in 90 days. And then I went back 90 days before that. I measured October, November, and December. Then January, February, and March. The first 90-day period, we had 491 downloads. In the second period, we had 685. So we are dramatically growing, almost by 50%. We want to grow a lot further. So we're asking you, share this podcast with someone else. I noticed the growth in Europe has recently been moving forward as well, which is exciting. And we are everywhere. Oceania, Japan, Uruguay, just a variety of areas. We are out there trying to help the entire LGBT community encourage you to keep your family together.
Mm-hmm.
We are saving lives one podcast at a time. Come on back next week. We'll see you Monday.